Hi everyone, it's Nini. Welcome to my channel. I've chosen to focus just on Midwest true crime because I'm a Minnesota farmer's daughter. Today's case is kind of a mystery and it might not necessarily be a crime. It is a car accident, but there are things about it that make you think there might possibly be something else going on with it. Before I get into the case, I do want to mention that the victims, they were drunk driving. I don't think anybody will be judgy about them in the comments, but if you are, I will delete the comments. I don't want to be the type of channel that deletes a bunch of comments. The main reason I started YouTube was to be able to talk to people in the comments, and so I don't want to ever take your voice away from you unless you are being disrespectful to the victims. You can come at me all you want. I'm a grown woman, I can take it, but if there's ever a comment that is disrespectful to the victims, I will delete that because it's not their choice that I'm sitting here talking about them. Like I said, they were drunk driving, but who hasn't had a beer or a glass of wine and gotten in the car? Maybe you smoked cigarettes before you were 18, or you smoked weed before it was legal. We can't judge people just because their sin is a different color than ours. But let's get into the case. Today we're going to go to South Dakota. South Dakota. Specifically the southeast portion near Lake Andes, South Dakota. Lake Andes is a small town of less than 1,000 people. It's not that far from the Missouri River. The Yankton Sioux Tribe Reservation is also very close by. The people we're going to talk about today were members of the Yankton Sioux Tribe. Arnold Archambeau and Ruby Ann Bruguier. I apologize if I am pronouncing those last names incorrectly. This happened back in 1992. Arnold and Ruby were high school sweethearts. Arnold's aunt, Karen Tuttle, described Arnold as nice and said that he never got into trouble. He was popular in school and had even been crowned prom king. Ruby's father, Quentin, said that she was gentle, never spoke back. He said if Ruby ever did anything wrong, she confessed to him right away. In 1991, Ruby gave birth to their daughter, Erica. They were both still teenagers at this time, so as you can assume, it was kind of difficult for them, but they loved their daughter. In 1992, Arnold was 20 and Ruby was 19 years old. On Saturday, December 11th, the couple went out for a night of fun with Ruby's 17-year-old cousin, Tracy Dion, while Tracy's father watched the couple's daughter, who was about 1 year old. The three of them had a really good time. They went to several parties and they were drinking the whole night. And when I say the whole night, I mean the whole night. They didn't come back to Tracy's father's house until about 6 a.m. the following morning. When they show up to drop Tracy off and pick up their daughter, Tracy's father notices that they're all super drunk, and so he doesn't feel comfortable sending the baby with them. So he tells them he'll keep their daughter and then they can come back after they've sobered up. For some reason, Tracy decided to go with the couple and didn't stay home. The three of them drive away with Arnold behind the wheel. Not long after they leave, they pull up to an intersection on the edge of the Yankton Sioux Reservation. They pull up to the stop sign. Arnold says something about there's no other cars in the area and he slams on the gas. Now this is December in South Dakota and it was about 26 degrees at that time. There's snow, there's ice. When Arnold slammed on the gas, he ended up losing control of the vehicle. It rolls and the car ends up upside down in the ditch. The ditch has a bunch of frozen water in it and they end up upside down on top of that ice. Tracy would later say it was just like a snap of a finger. 1 second they were at the intersection and the next second they were upside down in the ditch.
We left from there, and then that's when we came up to that stop sign. That's all I remember is just him, us looking and, saying there ain't no cars and him spinning out from the stop sign. And it was just like a snap of a finger, and next thing I know, we end up in the ditch.
The next thing Tracy remembered, it was just she and Ruby in the car. Arnold was nowhere to be found. She heard Ruby crying out, "Oh my God," over and over and hitting the car in frustration. This causes Ruby's door to pop open, so Ruby slips out of the car. Tracy was going to follow, but before she could, the door closed again and she was unable to get out. Tracy doesn't know why Ruby left her there and didn't try to help her get out of the car. And when she talks about it, she does sound kind of hurt about it. I mean, I would be if there was a car accident and your cousin just leaves you in the car and doesn't try to help. I mean, that does hurt.
I know if that was me and I had gotten out, I wouldn't have left without trying to get Ruby out, Why she left, I don't know. Why Arnold left, I don't know. If if they left together. I don't know.
When paramedics arrive on the scene, they only find Tracy there. She tells them that there were 2 other people in the car with her, and she admits that they had been drinking. Police search the area. They even end up searching around the lake nearby, but there is no sign of Arnold or Ruby. The first assumption was that Arnold and Ruby fled the scene to avoid getting in trouble. All 3 of the people in the car that night had been under South Dakota's legal age to drink, so they all would have probably gotten in trouble. Arnold would have been in a lot of trouble because he was also driving while he was drunk. So it was thought, well, maybe they wanted to avoid getting arrested, and that was the reason that they fled the scene. But hours went on, and then days went on, and there was no sign of them. Both families said that they could see them leaving the scene to avoid getting in trouble because they still would have been drunk at the time, they would have been panicking, they wouldn't have been thinking clearly, but the family said that as soon as they sobered up, they would have contacted the families somehow. Even if they didn't come back to avoid being arrested, they would have at least let the families know somehow that they were safe. Both families also said there was no way the couple would have left their daughter for that long of a time. Police and other people would occasionally still walk the ditches in the area where the car crash occurred, but there was still no sign of Arnold or Ruby, and the police just left the investigation open. Over the next 3 months, Arnold and Ruby were supposedly sighted by 6 different people in South Dakota. One person claimed that they saw Arnold and Ruby get into a different vehicle the night of the accident and head east. Another person said that they saw Arnold at a New Year's Eve party just 3 weeks after the accident with 3 other people. That person talked to authorities and said that she had seen Arnold, and she also gave authorities the names of the 3 people that she had seen him with. Police interviewed those 3 people, but they didn't know what she was talking about and said that they were not with Arnold at that party. But that person swore up and down that it was Arnold. She even took a polygraph test and passed it. Police also gave a polygraph test to the 3 people that she had named, and they all failed it. Now, I don't know if the person who claimed she had seen Arnold was white or if she was Native American. If she was white, I do feel that white people, including myself, we can be very guilty of looking at non-white people and thinking that they do all look very similar. You know, all Asians look alike, all Native Americans look alike. I do kind of wonder if maybe she saw somebody who she thought was Arnold, and if she believed fully in her mind that it was Arnold, of course she would end up passing the polygraph test because she believed that she was telling the truth. South Dakota does have a very strong Native American population, but I think we're still guilty of that assumption. To be blunt, I think polygraph tests are a bunch of horse shit. I really don't put a lot of value in them. I have anxiety, so if I was strapped up to a bunch of wires and sensors, and every breath that I took and every heartbeat that I made was analyzed and scrutinized as I was being questioned by authorities, my anxiety would be through the roof. If I was asked what my full name was, even if I said the truth, I think it would show that I was lying. So the fact that the witness passed her polygraph but the 3 people failed theirs, I don't necessarily read too much into that. But that is just my opinion when it comes to polygraph tests. By March of 1993, spring had arrived in South Dakota and the weather turned a little bit warmer. The snow began to melt and the ice began to thaw. A person driving down the road where the accident had occurred happened to notice in the ditch where some ice had been thawing that there was a body floating in that water. He called police. Deputy Bill Youngstrom of Charles Mix County, who had been working on this case since the accident had happened, said that when he had heard that a body had been found in the ditch, he knew immediately that it was Arnold or Ruby. And this body would indeed end up belonging to Ruby. She was found about 75 feet from where the car had landed in the ditch. The next day, the police drained the rest of the water in the ditch, and they found Arnold's body about 15 feet from where Ruby had been found. Ruby's glasses and both shoes were missing. Her clothes were intact, but her body was very decomposed and she was almost hardly recognizable. They had to identify her by a tattoo that she had. Her clothes were frozen to the ground, and it was believed to be the same clothes that she was wearing the night that the crash had happened. Arnold's body was described as well kept and in almost perfect condition. They couldn't determine if the clothes Arnold was wearing were the same clothes that he was wearing the night of the crash. A set of 3 keys was found in Arnold's pocket. One was a car key, but it didn't belong to the car that he was driving, and family members didn't know what other vehicle it would belong to. The other 2 sets were house keys, but they didn't belong to any of their houses. To this day, it's not known what those keys belong to. A few pieces of Ruby's hair were found at the top of the ditch. Autopsies revealed the cause of death for both Arnold and Ruby to be exposure. There were no signs of foul play. They were unable to determine a time of death, so it was unknown if they did die immediately after the accident or if it was later on. Deputy Youngstrom said it is absolutely impossible that Arnold and Ruby were in that ditch the entire 3 months since the night of the accident.
It's impossible that they could have been there the entire 3 months. I myself personally walked that ditch several times during that period. I've gotten written affidavits from people that's also walked it, people that had nothing to do with the case. They couldn't have been there. They couldn't have been missed.
He feels that something happened that night after they had both left the car and that they were then murdered and returned to that spot later on. A lot of people do agree with Detective Youngstrom, and they think that Arnold and Ruby both survived the accident. Somebody captured them and held them for a few months and then murdered them and returned them to the crash site. When Detective Youngstrom talked about the autopsies revealing that both had died due to exposure, he said it is very likely that they did die of exposure, but he does not believe that they died of exposure in that ditch. People who don't believe this theory think that the police are just coming up with that theory to cover up for the fact that they missed finding Arnold and Ruby the night of the accident. Which, if that is the case, that is really sad because the crash didn't immediately kill either one of them. If they were still both alive and just in the snow and the police missed finding them the night of the accident, it makes you wonder if they would have been found, if they'd still be alive today. Ruby's aunt, Sharon Astoyer, that's probably another last name I'm butchering, so I apologize. She told the Rapid City Journal in March of 1993, quote, "When a Native American is charged with something, it's pursued heavily. However, when a Native American is a victim, it's not pursued with the same perseverance," end quote. And I do know it can get very political when crimes do happen to Native Americans because tribal police sometimes are involved, and I think there might be clashes between white police, I don't know what you call them, and tribal police as to who has the authority to investigate. But from my understanding, this did happen on the edge of the reservation, but it was outside the reservation, so that would have been the responsibility of Charles Mix County Sheriff's Office to investigate, and they did investigate, but did they just not do a good enough job? It does make you wonder, did they have the mindset, and I apologize for saying this, but maybe they just had the mindset that these were just drunk Indians and therefore didn't put a lot of work into searching for the bodies. A few hours before the bodies were found on that March day, 2 men were spotted near the ditch driving a large Trailblazer that supposedly did look a little suspicious. People wonder if that Trailblazer was putting the bodies in the ditch, but authorities have never been able to identify those men. Also, if somebody had dumped the bodies there, I don't think they would have done it that morning because Ruby's clothes were frozen to the ground. And I don't think that would have happened that quickly if they would have been left there shortly before they were found. Police did investigate a man who lived in a cabin north of Lake Andes. He had come to South Dakota from Alabama and he had a long criminal history. So there were rumors going around that he had come upon Arnold and Ruby while they were injured from the car crash, kidnapped them, held them in his cabin until he murdered them and then put their bodies back at the crash site. But authorities couldn't find anything to link him to Arnold and Ruby. There was just no evidence. The fact that Ruby and Arnold's bodies were in different stages of decompensation is something that a lot of people look at as proof that something sinister did happen that night. Because Ruby was more decomposed than Arnold, they think maybe she was killed first and then they killed Arnold later on and then got rid of the bodies at the same time. It does kind of sound suspicious, but to me I think it's easy to see why they were in different stages. If they had both been there the entire 3 months and were under ice or snow, that would end up preserving their bodies. Ruby, remember, was found on top of the thawing water, so she was exposed to the elements. They had to drain the ditch in order to find Arnold, so he was still under cold water, which would explain why his body was not as far along in decomposition as Ruby's was. It was more protected, basically. People also think that it is weird that Ruby's clothes were in good condition, but her body was not. Like, they were thinking if she was captured the night of the accident, maybe she ended up wearing different clothes, and then after they killed her, they put her back in the clothes that she had been wearing that night, and that's why the clothes were in good condition, but she was not. I don't think clothing deteriorates as quickly as our bodies do, so I don't think it's too odd. Unsolved Mysteries did an episode on Arnold and Ruby, and I will leave a link to that below. And in that episode, Deputy Youngstrom said that if Arnold and Ruby's daughter ever asked him what happened to her parents, he wanted to be able to give her an answer. He didn't want to just tell her, I don't know. Speaking of Deputy Youngstrom, this might not mean anything, but I did want to mention it. In 2000, he was actually suspended from the police force because he was accused of embezzling drug money. Between August of 1996 and April 1999, he supposedly took about $5,000 that was supposed to be paid to drug informants. He was accused of making up names of informants, and that money was supposed to go to informants, and instead he kept the money himself. He did plead not guilty, and his defense attorney said Deputy Youngstrom was just a terrible bookkeeper, and that would explain some of the discrepancies in the funds. I tried to find if he was found guilty and went to prison, or if he was found innocent and if he was able to get his job back with the police, but Google failed me. I really wanted to find out if he was convicted or not, because just because somebody is charged with something doesn't mean they actually did it. It might not have anything to do with Arnold and Ruby's case, but I did want to find out the outcome of that, because if he was found guilty, that could show his character, which again, even if he had bad character, that doesn't necessarily mean anything with Arnold and Ruby's case. But Deputy Youngstrom was the one who was adamant that he searched that ditch thoroughly, and Arnold and Ruby were not in the ditch the entire 3 months that they were missing. I am curious if they used cadaver dogs at all to walk up and down the ditch in the area of the crash. I would think even if Arnold and Ruby were under the snow, that dogs could still smell them, because you know they have dogs who, if there's an avalanche and skiers get buried, they train dogs to be able to find those people underneath the snow. So I think they can still smell humans under the snow. So if they would have used them, the dogs maybe could have led them to Arnold and Ruby's bodies sooner. But I didn't find anything that said if they did use them or not. The FBI did investigate the case, but they closed it in 1999, saying that it was just a car accident. They referenced the coroner's cause of death as exposure to support that it was just a car accident. However, you did have Deputy Youngstrom being adamant that something more was involved, and some of the family members still believe that something sinister did happen to Arnold and Ruby that night, and that there was more to this than just a regular car accident. If you do happen to know any information about what happened to Arnold and Ruby that night, you still can call Charles Mix County Sheriff's Office at 605-487-7625. I lean more towards thinking that Arnold and Ruby were in the ditch the entire 3 months. Because the cause of death for both of them was exposure, I think they both did survive the initial accident, and we know for sure that Ruby did survive it because Tracy heard her in the car, but I think they did both end up in the snow, or they fell through the ice and succumbed to the cold. It wasn't until the snow and the ice thawed that their bodies were then found. The only thing that makes me question that is if they had fallen through the ice, there would have been a hole where their bodies went through. And you think that would have been noticeable to people who were searching the area? And that makes me think that maybe police didn't put that much of an effort into looking for them. Maybe they just are saying that they did. There was that set of 3 keys that were found in Arnold's pocket. One belonged to a car and the other 2 belonged to a house or a building. That's the only thing that I really can't think of a valid explanation for. They never found out what those keys belonged to. I thought there was a way with car keys that you could tell the make and model of a car based on the key, but maybe that's just on newer vehicles. This case happened in 1992. I kind of wonder, since they were going from party to party, if the keys belonged to somebody at one of the parties and they just never came forward. But the keys are kind of suspicious. The keys could be something that could lead validation to thinking that something other than just a car accident happened to Arnold and Ruby that night. I wouldn't say this is unsolved because the cause of death wasn't murder, but there is that mystery to it. I'm really curious what you think. Do you think they died the night of the accident or shortly after in the snow? Or do you think somebody came upon them, saw these 2 drunk and injured individuals and took advantage of them? That's all I have for today's case. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.